Hello and welcome to Fault Lines. I'm your host Shahzad Raza. Is Pakistan's economy moving in the right trajectory? If yes, how long would it take to start benefiting the general masses? This is the key question I'm going to raise today in my program, and joining the studio by Ahmed Durrani. He's an economist and very well-known personality on the television. You must have seen him. Thank you so much, Ahmed Durrani, joining us. And we have Usman Chohan, economic expert, joining us in the studio as well. Thank you so much, Usman Chohan, as well. And very soon we will be joining by Mehtab Haider as well. Coming straight to you, Ahmed, without any further ado, how do you define the evolution of Pakistan's economy in the last decade? I mean, ups and downs, if I ask you.
Well, thank you very much, Shahzad. I mean, I think the decade is a very interesting story, but I think more than anything else, if we look back, this has not been a fundamentally great decade for us. It's been a decade of contraction overall, but Pakistan's economy cannot be studied over this decade without actually bringing into fore the external influences that we've gone through over the decade. And when I say external influences, let's talk about, and Pakistan's economy, as you know very well, is particularly fragile and in a bit very reliant on imports, not just for the petroleum, oil and lubricants, which basically are the wheel of our economy, but also for a lot of raw material, as you can see. While on one hand we have been struggling with our geopolitical situation, the whole security, the geoeconomics that goes with the security, seems like a term that's been beaten around a lot, but unfortunately that does matter for Pakistan. I think also the other thing we've seen is sort of the up and down of the impact of US and the change of trajectory in US from the Biden rule starting, which all happened within this decade, to Trump re-emerging again. Coming back into Pakistan, I think it's important, rather than look at what was done during the previous regime, let's look at what's done now between the interim and that, because Pakistanis, if you realistically look at it.
The reason why I ask you this question is, I mean, I always told by the persons like you, the economists, and the people who understand economy, is that economy bounces back always. So once we were seeing, the lower trajectory or the downward trend, so it is the time that we may see some, positive developments, and actually which would benefit the general masses.
Okay, so first, Shahzad, let's be clear. I'm not an economist. I keep correcting you. I'm a student of economics for the last 30 years, right? So I'm fundamentally a development specialist.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit, and that's why, because I do work on intersectional issues. So this bouncing back scenario, I mean, for anything to bounce back, there's got to be air in it. Starting with the simple basketball, if you don't have the problem on it, it's not going to bite. So what's air for this economy? What's air for our economy? I mean, realistically speaking, what are the strengths of our economy? Our economy has always been, and I mean, at least so far, has been an agrarian economy. I mean, more than 60–70% of all people employed are in the directly or indirectly connected with the agricultural sector. Now, the agricultural sector is not how we think of as we did in the 50s and 60s, because over time, lots of things have changed. The composition of products have changed, including the composition of food, including the composition of the clothes we wear. So it's a shifting market in terms of demand coming from that. But on the supply side also, I mean, realistically, the other thing that, other than agriculture, is really the supply of capital in the private sector, right? And the appropriate rules and regulations that let that flourish. Again, that's the second part of the air. You can call it pretty much the valve that will allow the air to be filled. We have performed very poorly on both this financial inclusion. We performed very poorly on essentially making sure that credit spreads around to pretty much every, and the SMEs, so again, despite everything, the 3–4 million SMEs in Pakistan, I mean, are really the driving wheel of Pakistan, right? Although we try to focus more on the 30 or textile large units and the final product producers. We focus more on the Pakistan Stock Exchange, 300 to 400 people there. But I think that Pakistan's economy to bounce back, the third element, which is very critical, is stability. And by stability, it's a multi-pronged thing. It's not just saying, oh, the government has changed. No, governments change everywhere. It's the stability of rules, the stability of policies, stability of regulations, stability of the basic ability
And how possibly can you achieve that stability?
Okay, so the thing is,
should be a general understanding among the politicians
so I
and
think
policymakers.
that for us, and I don't want to, sort of take this too far, but realistically, we always argue, and I think the thing we forget, and I think this is a very direct answer to your question, is the depletion of skills in Pakistan in the last 10 years.
Depletion of skills?
Yeah.
What type of skills?
All skills.
Okay.
Just skilled people.
So
whether it be
what about all those claims that we have a lot of talent all around?
Talent and skill are two different things.
Okay.
You teach talent skills, right? So if a person is talented, hard work and talent and skills are three different things, right? Applied work and talent and skills are very different things. So I think where we are lacking right now for that bounce back, the fundamental, and the problem, if I may close on that, is that the reason I think the stabilization is not getting there is because the same paucity of skills that we have in the private sector, right? In any field, right? Skills, not we are talented. I don't know one to say Allah makes everyone talented in some way or other.
Sure.
So, but that skill thing is spreading over into our politics as well. So I would think that today's politician is far less skilled than the politician of 10 years ago. But I'll stop there.
What do you say, Usman, that worst is over as far as the state of is concerned, and now we would be seeing some positive developments in near future?
It is hard to say. The truth is that we are going through a decade of turbulence globally. We had COVID at the beginning of the decade. Then we had this inflation crisis right after. It's been a very rough 5 years, and so could something bad happen further? Seems to be the trend this decade. For example, there's a lot of tension.
You really cannot get rid of all those trends, right? Because you are a country and you have to survive among the global community. No?
Yes, but in terms of survival, we do a good job. In terms of resilience, in terms of facing crises head on, we do pretty well. But the question is, are such crises likely to emerge? It's very possible. For example, look at what's happening in the Middle East. You just don't know what's going to happen at any point that's going to impact the oil price, and you import oil. That kind of thing is still a very big concern. But insofar as we're trying to deal with immediate crises, certainly we are in a better position today than 2 years ago, for example, in terms of inflation, in terms of all these crises. So credit goes to navigating our little boat on a large ocean, but it's hard to say if things will remain as calm as they are in the very present moment we're talking.
Recently, we have seen the downward trend as far as the inflation is concerned. Recently, the State Bank of Pakistan again announced, a reduction in the interest rate. So all these trends and the news, do you think that they say that the state of economy is stabilizing, or you think that it's just, a political statement to begin with?
Well, there's always a political messaging that goes with such things. The political messaging will try to exaggerate the success, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a foundation. The foundation is that if the interest rates...
So there is a foundation?
There is a foundation.
Okay.
And the basis of that foundation is that economic technocrats like to look at inflation, even though they should really look at cost of living. So because they look at inflation and the number is coming down, they feel happy. And that's a good thing, because if it continued at that runaway pace, things would be a lot uglier. So you normally debate in a kind of counterfactual manner.
What exactly happened? Not long ago, the rupee was losing strength against dollar. It stabilized, to a certain extent, and all these two developments I just mentioned. There must be some steps that were taken by the government, by the policymakers. I would like you to identify those steps and the policies.
Well, you gave a good example. One example is that they took hard measures to curb speculation in the foreign currency market. Another one is that they raised the interest rate so high that they basically killed all demand.
Right.
Maybe that was a bit heavy-handed when we look back, but because of that, you basically curbed your import bill. Similarly, you took measures in terms of the flight of capital and the repatriation of profits, which hurt business, but it also killed demand, and you wanted that. At the same time, they're working towards fixing some structural issues that include our energy sector. There's work being done on that, but it's not over. Similarly, the agriculture sector, they're working, but it's not over.
Right.
So there are measures across the board.
Please continue.
That's all.
Okay, that's all. Ahmed Durrani, so the question is, the government took some good steps and they translated into some, good news, which we just mentioned at least. The government always takes credit of giving the businessmen space, the required space, or they were already demanding for a long time. So the facilities are fulfilling the demands of the business community. You think that these were two of the most important steps the government has taken recently? I mean, you can include the role of SIFC in that.
Yeah, actually, I mean, just carrying on from Usman, I think that the government's by and large working on a stabilization policy. The majority of the ruling government is a party that is very business friendly, or it is at least counted as business friendly. But a subtext there is it's business friendly to the large business people, right? And how many large business houses are there today? I mean, you remember the 60s, 22 families. By all means, today, based on studies done recently since COVID, 34 or 35, 36 families basically control everything in Pakistan, including, by and large, by extension, by family, all of the performing PSX. Right, so I'm not going to go to SIFC because SIFC really is not connected to anything that the Pakistan economy has to do, and I'll get to that later. SIFC is really kind of looking at getting inward investment, raising the bar. They have other objectives, at least they may think they have other, but what appears to us is different. So coming back to the fact that, why is this, so one of the demands was keep the rupee stable. So we have the great magician, Mr. Dar, who essentially keeps the rupee stable. How he does that, or how the government or the finance minister manages that, half of it is known and half of it is unknown, right? So because we are on a state channel, I think that I'll tell you the half that's known. The half that's known is simply making sure the demand exists and is supplied. So the supply of foreign currency exists. But I think the important thing here to note is that there's a lot also happening which, because of the business friendliness of this government, they are able to also not just control speculation in the way, because they are business people themselves. They know who speculates. In fact, they were in the 90s the largest speculators. So essentially when we get here today, it's like saying, I know what you're doing. So please come and have. So it's almost like the same regime that happens with the IPPs they're doing, which is a good thing. And I think the government should be congratulated on that, because it's almost like saying, we know how to fix the economy. We know actually beyond what shows at the macro level. So let me get a bit micro and go and call up each business house and say, hey guys, let's put our house in order XYZ. Now, I'm, by the way, telling you just a story that can be told. These dollar stabilizers. Now, please understand that the dollar stabilizing, whether for better or for worse, I mean, technically, according to the fund, we are now under the next program and we are, supposed to have a market floor exchange rate. But as you can read from a lot of the excellent, I mean, I like reading Ali Khizr's stuff in the Business Recorder, and I think that is excellent stuff, because if some of us manage, and I think Usman knows that, the real economic exchange rate, right? So the REER, as they call it. The REER had been pretty stable. In fact, there were discussions between Ashfaq Hassan, NAS, the big think tanks. Sorry, I'm naming names because it's important to attribute these pieces of information. But then we also realized that even those sources now, after a year has passed, and we see that all these uncertainties that Usman pointed out are now re-emerging. We basically are again at the spot where the REER is raising its head. So we are currently in a stabilizing. The thing to remember.
We are stabilized. Okay.
No, we are yeah, but stabilization means essentially contraction of the economy.
Okay.
Right? So two things can contract. Either public spending can contract or the government can contract, right? So in this case, the public spending is contracting. So, I mean, that's the simplest way of looking at it, right? So when public spending contracts, who suffers? It's the average Joe, the average Pakistani, the average Usman Alam or average Ahmed Durrani that suffer. Okay? So let's stop there, and I'll answer if you have anything specific.
You talk about stability, right? So how important or fundamental is a general consensus among the political elite to have, the sustainable policies in the future? Because once they have the policy, I mean, the next government, they might, change it with a stroke of a pen. So that's the key question. The government keeps on asking all the opposition parties to sit together and at least have a charter of economy, understanding on key economic issues. So at least once we don't have that key understanding, so how would we go about it?
No, I think Usman also knows that Stephen Durkin was here, right? So we know the current government's at, and I mean, your question is so apt. In fact, if you look at it, the recent book 2 years ago, there was a book launch called The Bargain of the Elites. I think you saw that, right? So the author is Stephen Durkin. He is not, he was a part of FCDO before the chief economist differed, but now he's at Oxford, right? So the Bargain of Elites says exactly what the government is following. There has been a sort of disgruntlement between classical economists and Stephen on this particular issue. The government has actually not been quite sure, because I think that the government, the one thing that they have done, yes, they are doing pretty much this, because I'm not saying they're following Durkin, but they seem to understand Durkin. However, some parts of government do, some parts don't. Amazingly, the Q bloc understands this, the Prime Minister understands this, I'm not sure the P bloc understands this. Having said that, what is the great part of this? The great part of this is that, it's a very simple theory. Instead of going just stabilization, you let the pie grow, right? As the pie grows, the elites still get their rents, but there's more to eat for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? So in the absence of a total annihilation of corruption, rent-seeking practices, which is part and parcel of every culture. You just see how many people have just been committed in the US. Large people with $1 trillion under their belt, have been actually put behind bars for the amount of rents and bribes. This is part of human nature. So the thing is, for good enough governance, we need to let the pie grow. So I think that I agree with you. That's the right.
Are you, Usman, you can chip in if you want to, that you increase the size of the pie, and even if there are certain issues, so you just you can shift your focus. For instance, the issue of corruption. Of course, everywhere there is a corruption. I mean, all across the globe. So, but we are, wasting so much energy in controlling or curbing corruption. But instead of focusing there, we can just increase the size of the pie. So even there is a corruption, everyone has something to eat, as Armin suggested.
Yes, Amir Saab has hit the nail on the head. The best solution is to increase the pie. But there's a difference between third world elites and first world elites, which matters a lot. First world elites keep their money and their base of operations in the first world. They don't, so for example, American elites are not going to flee to China, or they're not going to flee to Europe. But third world elites have one foot here.
What about the tax havens all across the board?
Oh, yeah, but they don't live in those havens.
Yeah, but they have their money stashed over there.
Yes, but their ultimate base of operations is their country.
Okay.
Third world countries have one foot in their own country and one foot in the West. That makes a very big difference, because they can shift their energies. This is true for Africa, it's true for South Asia, and it makes a very different calculus for how they will deal with problems.
And it's a funny thing, as long as you are, having your money in the country where you're living in, or you are utilizing your money, whichever way or whichever means you are earning that money, that is fine. I mean, this is very strange to me, at least.
No, but imagine that your elites actually long to spend more time in a place like London or Dubai than in their own country. But the California elite will still spend most of their time in California, either way. So that's the equation that differs. The West African elite wants to spend more time in Paris than West Africa. This makes it very different in terms of what pie they're thinking of, because they have half their meal here and half their meal here at most. That makes it very difficult. So until and unless our elite, whomsoever you qualify them as, have a bigger stake here than outside, you won't resolve these problems.
So that's what I understood, is that whatever wealth we are generating, we are not really getting the benefits of that wealth generation. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. That is absolutely right.
Okay. You are saying something?
I actually have to differ. I mean, the thing is, this is getting passé, right? The wealth, so remember, the power is like this, there's a certain amount, the elites still park it outside, right? They're still going on their vacations. I mean, what's the largest pie that we park is go to Hajj, go to Umrah. I mean, so let's get it very straight, right? Can't stop that, can we? So let's assume that, this pie, a certain, let's say 30% of the pie goes to external balances. They're going to keep their money out, they're going to spend it there. they're in tax havens. Well, let me tell you that most of the people, when you have unfurled them, starting from President Trump down to the 7 great sister companies who control more money on earth than anybody else, they all operate offshore. They all have companies abroad. The difference there in the first world is it's the citizen first. I think we're missing the basic point here, right? So let the pie go. Imagine this, the pie is growing up. So who takes care of the welfare? So currently, let me give you a simple example. Let's say there's the medical profession. A lot of our doctors are actually sitting in the US, in Ireland, to name a few countries, right? So, but the problem is that do you think which third of the graduates are these? These are your top third graduates. Who spent money on them? We did. Where did the universities come up from? From tax flow and inflow money. Once skilled, where does this talent go? It emigrates. So I think the biggest problem in Pakistan to keep, this is just, sorry, it's not perfunctory, you have a great point, but I think that the point here is, do we have the security of the citizen? Is there provision of justice?
And who would ensure that security?
The security of the citizen is the only job of the state, if I may be very forthright. Start from Islam, go to any principles, to Plato, to everywhere. It's the basic principle of protecting a human individual and providing them security. It's like the role of the state is that of a mother and father in a family.
But isn't it the fundamental right of every citizen?
No, it is, but is it being provided?
Enshrined in the Constitution of Pakistan.
If this was provided and be given Pakistan's tax rate, it's pretty high. I think everyone will pay tax, everyone will contribute. People said the roads. I said, before you fix the roads, make sure the police wala, if I raise my hand, takes care of a problem my sister is having, my son is having, I am having, my wife is having. No, we can't rely on that. You even have to be part of the elite bargain. So I think the security and justice reform is the fundamental driving factor for any econ growth, for reversing the trend.
But again, I keep on asking this question in my...
I was going to make a joke quickly.
Okay.
So actually, I'm quite happy that the rich of Pakistan, I wish more people were rich so they don't go around Pakistan destroying our very fragile ecosystem. We do not realize we have... Gilgit-Baltistan, for example, is the world's third largest collection of ice. Do we not realize that we are rarer than any place on earth just because of having these mountains here? And I would prefer that they go spend their money elsewhere. However, that's a side deal.
Okay, fine. But it's an endless debate, and I keep on this question in my shows that if there are lots of concerns and the questions and apprehensions by the people towards the state that the state is not fulfilling its duties. These are the questions we always hear. But okay, but once you are a citizen of Pakistan and having the social contract, which we call the Constitution of Pakistan, it's your obligation to pay the taxes to become a law-abiding Pakistani citizen and fulfill your duties, right? You cannot, just go around and say, well, the government is not giving me that facility and that's why I'm behaving like this. You cannot do it. At least, for us, that we have to be, a good Pakistani, law-abiding, constitution-abiding citizen first, no?
Yes, I fundamentally agree with you that a contract is between two parties. So it's a chicken and egg game if neither side fulfills their bargain. So as a decent person, you might as well do your part. But at some point, you will note that all states on earth are tyrannical by nature. They exercise the legitimate use of force, right? And so in order for us to accede to that, the other side of this contract has to fulfill, and it has to give two things, peace and justice. That's all it has to do. And in exchange, we will promote peace and justice too, while doing our subservient duties.
No, but you compare 2025 with 2008 or 2007, and you can see that how much the governments or the state of Pakistan contributed to ensure the peace or security in the country, no?
There's many ways to gauge this, but I don't think our justice
But just compare the
rankings-
situation in back in 2007 and now in 2025.
But that's an arbitrary benchmark. You might as well pick 1857. You might as well pick 1703. You might as well pick 5,000 years ago. And different benchmarks will give you different results. There was more peace
I'm
and
giving
more...
you the example from the recent past. You know, the memories which are still, I mean, bad memories, but still fresh in our minds.
Yes, but then why not pick the 90s? Why not pick the 70s? Why not pick this? It's arbitrary how you do that. If you don't hit a minimum threshold that the people are satisfied with, then you have to fill your side of the bargain, and the people also have to fill their side. Otherwise, it's an arbitrary measurement. Why 2008? Why not 2024?
Won't you agree, Amir Durrani, that the situation as far as is concerned, and that is fundamentally important for a good, stable economy and to attract the foreign investor, is very much stable these days compared to the last 2 decades, or to be specific, 2007.
Oh, you're saying that the situation in Pakistan today is more stable than, say, 2007?
Security-wise.
Okay.
The kind of situation we were having back in 2007.
There is two things here. There is something called internal disarray, right? That is what I call security of a citizen, right? You have two different institutions that take care of internal security and the institution that takes care of external security. The internal security is really a local function. It is because we do not have a third-tier government, but technically it's really the job of the district or the municipality to really patrol, police, and provide security, right? It's a provincial function in our case, right? The internal security of a state, so if someone protests, as you've seen recently, right, the PTI has been rather in disarray and creating a lot of instability, but that is not the responsibility. It's not saying this is insecurity of Pakistan. This is localized insecurity, and it has to be dealt with in a localized manner. What I think is different, or maybe you're alluding to, 07, I understand the lawyers' movement, everything, but that was
No,
internal.
the state of terrorism, not the lawyers'
Hold
movement.
on. It's just, by 5 and 6 and 7, there was an ebbing. But realistically, the recent 1 year, again, because of different ways of benchmarking and the way we report, for example, today, let me challenge you, in 2007, maybe every movement in Karak was not reported as it is today. So I find that as a data person or as a human being, an unfair comparison, right? So I'll not go there at all, because I think that the question here should be much deeper, right? Yes, we agree Pakistan is fiscally stabilizing.
Okay.
We're very happy, right? But with this stabilization is coming contraction, right? And as I said, that now is the time to focus on the fact that does the government contract and right size itself or not? So I was just trying to re-verify what you just said. So it was John Adams who basically said there should be no political parties. The founding fathers had a big debate in the US. The Jeffersonian letters are there. And one of the most classic quotes is, government is an evil that must be tolerated, right? So the government is an evil that has to be tolerated. Why? Because too much government is bad for us.
Yeah.
Right? Government equates this to control, government equates this to, they are marshalling our the mixing of politics and religion, the mixing of society and religion and all this. It's all become quite a messy sea. You don't even know if you're in the Black Sea or you're in the Aral Sea or if you are actually in the Indian Ocean, right? So we don't even know what kind of fish we have to catch. So it's a very difficult task these days.
People may, disagree with you or those letters wrote, centuries ago, even when they see the Chinese model, to be specific. I mean, how they progress and, there was a control,
they have no
and
democracy.
then they
have no democracy. They don't have a political party. So am I not proven right?
Okay, we can talk about it later. But we are joining by Mehtab Haider, senior journalist and who writes extensively on economy. Thank you very much for joining us, Mehtab. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
All right. We discussing, in general, the state of economy in Pakistan, and so far there's been a lot of, philosophical discussion. So I would like to ask you a very direct question at the moment, and because since you are writing on the state of economy since a very long time, what are the immediate and key challenges for the Pakistan's economy, and how do you think that this year 2025 would augur us? Would it augur well for us?
Yes, thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Actually, the problem is after striking the IMF deal, Pakistan's economy has been entered into stabilization mode. It's the usual course of course which we have witnessed in the past, and which the economist always, because Pakistan's economy is always described as the boom bust cycle. So we have entered into a stabilization mode after striking the IMF program under the extended fund facility, which we have graduated after completion of the 9-month program of standby arrangement. Now the problem is the economy has contracted, and because of this contraction, we have achieved stabilization. Under this stabilization,
Is it a good thing or a bad thing, the contraction of economy?
just I want to explain my argument. Actually, the inflation has reduced, but interest rate has also receded. But the problem is that the fundamental structural problems are there. The structural problems are: have we been able to stimulate growth without creating imbalances on our internal and external front? Have we been able to mobilize the domestic resources so that we can reduce our reliance on foreign savings? Have been able to increase our exports? Rather, we can increase non-debt creating inflows on sustained basis. Have been able to curtail the monster of the circular debt in the energy sector.
Mehtab, to cut a long story short, I mean, again, a very direct question: how would we be able to, do all this?
Actually, the problem is,
curtail the tech.
without
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
without creating imbalances, will we be able to achieve high growth? For instance, we will have to mobilize the domestic resources. Pakistan cannot survive with only this kind of limited tax to GDP ratio. For instance, our tax to GDP ratio is hovering around 8 to 9%.
How can we possibly do all this? I mean, just asking you that what are the steps we supposed to take to do all this, or all the steps you just mentioned?
Agriculture income tax is must. Broadening of tax base is must. Retailers should be brought into the tax net. Services should be brought, fully services sector should be brought into the tax net. GST on goods is the domain of the center. GST on services is the domain of the provinces. Harmonization of GST is must. For instance, I did a story last week. In Pakistan, there are 5.9 million filers. 2.6 million are nil filers. This kind of system cannot survive. We will have to reduce the monster of the circular debt. We will have to reduce a competitive, we will have to ensure a competitive market in the energy sector. So this energy sector and the taxation problems are the structure underlying problems, and we will have to resolve that.
Very right. Stay with us, Mehtab. Amir, the issue of circular debt, I mean, it's such a vicious circle we always talk about. For instance, if you don't pay a bill for a month or two, and the people would come and they just disconnect your power supply, and end of the story. So how this circular debt, how it mounts all the time? How it is possible that, for instance, if a government institution or any other organization, or even the people, the domestic user, they are not paying the bill. I mean, easily the power supply companies can, just get them out of the business.
Well, the story behind this is very, very, very strange, and I'm really sad Mehtab brought this up because this takes 30 days to explain. But number one, I'll do this in quickly. Number one, it's not a circular debt. It's a telescopic debt. When you open a telescope, as you know, as you keep opening it to reach out far, the old day telescopes open like that. So the front of the telescope is very large and the rear is a very small funnel. So this is the cost of, let's say, producing electricity. I'll be very, very simple. This is the cost of getting it, final cost delivered to your house from my house, right? So the thing is, now you have been subsidizing this delta, right? In this case, on both sides, right? This delta now has to be equated. So you're trying to convert this back into like a tube which has equal lenses on both sides. It's not going to happen. There are many factors behind this. Number one, so it is not a circular debt, it's a telescopic debt. This is not me, there are people much better than me who have done research on this. Second, currently, the subsidies that we provide are mistargeted, right? Which results in productive sectors being deprived and social sectors being encouraged, right? I find this really hilarious, coming from an Islamic culture, an Islamic country, where belt tightening is part of a virtue, right? Our Prophet, peace be upon him, did it, is considered really impossible because you are some grand empire. No. Third thing, right? So mistargeted subsidies, number two. The third important thing is there is and has always been a fuel problem. As long as the entire value chain of production is massively dependent on external inputs outside Pakistan, right? And the last point here is some very, very bad deals have been stuck. For example, companies
which are being revoked.
Yeah, I'm happy. We've been saying this for the last, well, at least now for 10 years since I've been back, that, just walk away. You're the government. Don't think about it twice. Oh, we will get our rating gone. No, all countries do that. It takes a year or two to get it back. You are a government. You're a sovereign. You're not a Habib bank or you're not a state bank, a little bank in the middle. So but the thing is that these mistakes, which the government is now trying to correct, the minister Muhammad Ali, who's part of this commission, he's doing good work, right? So, but the thing is that the bad work has been, it takes a while to earn it. As they say, to sin, it takes a moment, but to repay and to renege and to get absolution, it might take a lifetime.
Exactly. Usman, a very important point. One, recently we are seeing some pressure as far as the tax collection is concerned. Federal Board of Revenue is missing some targets, and we believe and we hope that it would achieve the target that was set in the last budget. When you say that you place some, not to the restriction, but you become vigilant as far as the smuggling is concerned, or you talk about, not importing unnecessary goods, be it the commercial or domestic use. So always there is a dent or the pressure on the FBR's collection, custom duties, for example. So how do you think, how would they surmount this problem?
It's a very good question, because you're right to allude to the relationship between our fiscal deficit and our current account deficit. If you import less, you'll tax less, because you do tax your imports, so you help to balance from higher imports your fiscal problem. But in the larger context, I believe that too much pressure is being put on the FBR, unfair pressure, because it's one authority sitting in the center which has to deal with 25 crore people. There's no authority which is given that kind of taxation responsibility anywhere. Usually you spread it out to the ground, to the local government. You have district level stuff happening and revenue collection of various types, including provincial property taxes. Mehtab Saab correctly said that the goods and the services are treated differently, all of this stuff. So there's only so much one authority can do, and you actually have to devolve down, because we're such a big country now. That's the way to go about it. Otherwise, the FBR will constantly get pressure and will constantly miss targets, so we have to help it out.
So here comes the role of the provincial governments,
yes,
right?
and further down.
And further down, the local governments.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, but always we hear this argument that, for instance, the government in Sindh, normally they say that we are the people who pay the highest amount of tax, but we were not giving the same amount of facilities in return by the federal government. I mean, these are the arguments we keep on hearing. But actually, is it the reality that the provincial government is actually collecting the taxes and sending it back to Islamabad, to FBR's kitty?
Well, the province is probably the wrong lens of analysis here. It's Karachi that generates 30% of our taxes, but that's not all of Sindh. Not all of Sindh is as productive as Karachi. So that is a special case. But the point again is to go at the city level, and so you would get more out of it.
No, but Karachi happens to be in Sindh. That's fine. But what I'm saying is, I mean, besides this, the fundamental factor, the situation of Karachi, the thing that what is the contribution of the provincial government in collecting and sending the tax money back to the Federal Reserve?
Okay, that's a very good question. It's in terms of the balance. So how much does it take from the Federation versus give to it? At the immediate point, the first point of departure in your budget, a huge chunk goes straight from the Federation to the provinces, no questions asked. That's why you end up with this huge line items like, oh, we're so busy servicing debt. But that's because the Federation just hands it out, no questions asked. So the balance between the Federation and provinces is not in the favor of the Federation. And fiscal federalism is a problem that all large countries face. But the way we have it with 4 huge federating units, one being particularly large, and having this hollow center assuming the debts, this is not a good model for fiscal federalism, to be honest.
Okay, one final question, Ahmed. The government is giving a lot of importance on the human resource development, the skill development you mentioned in earlier part of the program. But there are people who are pessimistic about it and saying that this is not the human resource but a population bomb which may explode in future. You don't know about it. So what are the steps the government must take to ensure that it's going to be a useful human resource in the future?
No, well, I mean, to be very honest on the demographics, the government has a big problem on its hands. So fundamentally, they're right. It's really a bomb in the sense that we really need to control our birth rate. Okay, but we don't need to go helter-skelter and go the route of one-child policy because it's all kicked back. And fertility rates are very high in Pakistan, right? I mean, so there is much to be done about still in terms of population. The second part, I think where the government, so let's assume the fertility rates stay about the same or roughly the women labor force participation increases tomorrow slowly and the fertility rates go down because there is a correlation between the two. So you basically then what do you get? You basically, if you start thinking about it, there is a problem because these are not just, when you say we have a young population, you say, okay, 15 to 30 or 15 to 35. No, it's actually the early childhood development that influences the batch of youth that you're going to get. 40% of Pakistan and Balochistan is stunting. So Pakistan is one of the 10 lowest countries in the world on stunting statistics, right? What is a stunted child? A stunted child means that it does not have the ability to think, right? It just is, the brain is not functioning. It may, so when the brain of such a child is not functioning, what happens, right? So I have been studying this quite long. So imagine that the stats, let's say 30% of the next 50 million Pakistanis that join in, 5 million Pakistani, 50 million, I was right, 50 million Pakistanis that join in are going to be stunted.
50 million?
So 50 million, let's say, are going to be stunted if we're growing at this stage, right, next 50 years. What are we going to do with these people? Are they going to become Taliban? That's a bad way of putting it, but are they going to become extremist forces? Where are we going to find employment for them? Because they really have no skills, they have nothing. So this demographic edge that we have, let me give you a similar example.
We can say they would not be contributing as they're supposed to.
They're not
Pakistani
citizens in Pakistan. So in fact, the rest of the population will have to take care of them. So these older, the geriatrics in our society, the octogenarians, have to be trained to somehow
so what are we supposed to do?
So essentially nutrition.
Okay.
Right? Secondly, we have found now that the use, let's say increasing contraception use, that doesn't mean simply distributing. It is being it doesn't mean that women don't have children. We have to sit down, and actually the latest research in the last 3 years is showing that digital means of reaching out to women and couples in such areas. Examples are there in Ethiopia, Somalia, similarly, sadly tribal areas, that has had more impact than other contraception sort of activities that have been carried out. So I think and the third thing is those that are born or are being born, make sure that they get the right nutrition.
In late 80s and early 90s, there have been a lot of extensive media public campaigns about the birth control and, the population control. But nowadays, when the issue is, aggravated a lot, and we haven't seen it lately.
Well, actually, again, extremism has crept in. Extremism has crept in because the state is unable to carry on this dialogue, because it itself, when the state says, I need this extremist element because they are voters, then we have no issues. Look at what's happened in the US.
This is one of the most serious challenges we must address sooner than later. But thank you very much, Ahmed Durrani, for joining us, Usman, Chohan, Mehtab, Haider, and thank you very much for watching the programs. Take care and Khuda Hafiz.